My wife slept with my best friend during our honeymoon, then secretly siphoned off $300, $0 from our joint account to buy a house for her affair partner. Now she's threatening to take everything in court. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, trying to make sense of everything that's happened. It all started on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, my honeymoon with. We'd been together for years, and I thought I knew her inside out. We had our ups and downs, sure, but I believed we were solid. That belief shattered faster than I could blink. It all began with little things. Started acting distant, more interested in her phone than in me. She'd disappear for long stretches, claiming she was checking emails or taking a call, but I could see the way she'd quickly hide her screen when I looked her way. At first, I brushed it off as stress from planning the wedding or maybe just her way of decompressing. But then I noticed the texts. They weren't just casual, they were flirtatious, sometimes downright explicit. I caught her once in the hotel room, locked in a hurried text exchange with someone named Jake. Her cheeks went red and she quickly shut her phone. I asked her who he was, but she brushed it off, saying he was just a she'd met at a conference. Yeah, right, I knew better. Things got even worse when I found her phone in the bathroom. I wasn't snooping, I swear. I just needed to grab some aspirin. But the moment I saw the notification pop up on her screen, my stomach dropped. It was a message from Jake. Can't wait to see you tonight, missed you all day. That was the last straw. I confronted her about it that night. She everything called me paranoid, said I was imagining things. She insisted she was faithful, that she loved me and I was just overreacting, but I wasn't convinced. The signs were there and I could feel it in my gut. Still, I wanted to believe her. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just paranoid, but then something even more shocking happened. I started noticing money missing from our joint account. Small amounts at first, $200 here, $500 there. I thought maybe it was an error or some kind of automatic payment I didn't recognize, but then I dug deeper. I pulled up the bank statements and that's when I saw it. There was a transfer of $300, $0 made to an account I didn't recognize. It was under her name, but the account was new, opened just a few months ago. My heart stopped. I looked into it further, and it turned out she had secretly siphoned off that money to buy a house for her affair partner. A house. While we were on our honeymoon, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This wasn't just cheating, it was outright betrayal on a scale I never imagined possible. She lied, cheated, and stolen from us all at once. That's when I knew I had to confront her again, but this time I was ready. I had the evidence. I was angry, hurt, and confused all at once. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew this was the end of our marriage as I knew it. I couldn't trust her anymore. Not after this. Not after she had taken everything. My wife, my money, my sense of security. I felt like I was living in a nightmare, and I didn't see a way out that didn't involve some kind of reckoning. The moment I discovered the full extent of her betrayal, everything inside me shifted. I sat there staring at the bank statements, the evidence of the house she bought with that stolen money, and I felt my blood boil. How could she do this? How could she lie, cheat, and then steal like some kind of villain in a bad movie? I couldn't believe I'd been so blind, so trusting. All those years I thought we were building something real, and it turned out she'd been planning her escape and her affair right under my nose. The first thing I did was call her. I wanted answers, but I already knew she'd lie her way out of it. Sure enough, she picked up with that bitchy tone she always used when she was trying to dismiss me. "What do you want, Mike? I'm busy," she snapped. I told her I knew everything about Jake, the house, the money. Her silence was deafening. Then she started to lie, of course. Everything. Said I was crazy, that I'd misunderstood, that she'd never cheated or stolen from us. I lost it. My voice rose, and I told her I wasn't some fool she could manipulate anymore. I told her I had the bank statements, the proof of the house, the transfers, everything. That's when she started to get defensive. "You're overreacting," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "You always accuse me of stuff I didn't do. You're just jealous because I found someone better than you." That's when I saw the true face of the bitchy, manipulative woman I'd married. She was trying to turn it around, make me the bad guy, just like she always did. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything, feeling the sting of betrayal deep in my chest. I thought about all the plans we'd made, all the trust I'd given her, and I realized that trust was gone. She had lied to me for months, probably longer, and she'd betrayed me in the worst way possible. The money she siphoned off was more than just theft. It was a declaration of war. While I was supposed to be on my honeymoon, she was sneaking around, buying a house for her lover, planning her escape and lying. To my face, I started to feel the full weight of what this meant. She was threatening to take everything, our house, our savings, maybe even custody of any future kids. She had lawyers lined up, I'm sure of it. It was a game and I was just a pawn in her sick chess match, but I refused to be played anymore. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit around and let her walk all over me. I needed a plan, a way to fight back emotionally, financially, and legally. The next morning, I started to gather evidence. I contacted a lawyer I found online, someone who specialized in betrayal and financial fraud. I also reached out to a private investigator I knew from years ago, someone who could dig up more dirt if I needed it. I was furious, but I also knew I had to stay calm, because if I lost my head now, I'd lose everything. I started to realize that this wasn't just about her cheating or stealing money. It was about protecting myself, my future, and whatever shred of dignity I had left. I also decided I'd confront her again, face to face, and get her to admit everything. I couldn't keep living in this fog of lies. I wanted her to see that I wasn't going to be a pushover anymore, that I was done being the nice guy who turned the other cheek. I needed her to understand that I had proof, and I was prepared to fight for what was mine, my money, my marriage, my life. That day, I felt a strange mix of anger, sadness, and determination. I knew this was the beginning of a long, ugly battle, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. But I also knew I had no choice. I had to stand up for myself, even if it meant tearing everything apart to do it. Because if I didn't, she'd keep walking all over me, cheating, stealing, lying, everything I swore I'd never let happen. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let her get away with it. After gathering all the evidence and talking to my lawyer, I knew I had to confront again. I wasn't about to let her keep spinning her lies and pretending everything was fine. I arranged to meet her at her favorite, an upscale place she liked too. Frequent when she wanted to feel special and in control. I wanted her to see that I wasn't backing down, that I had everything on my side now. When she arrived, she looked annoyed, like I was bothering her on her busy day. That bitchy smirk she always wore was already on her face. I sat across from her, laid the bank statements and the transfer records on the table, and watched her face drain of color. Her eyes darted from the papers to me, trying to gauge my reaction. "You lied to me," I said, my voice steady but cold. "You told me you were faithful, that you loved me, but you've been cheating, stealing from us, and buying a house for Jake. How could you do that?" She scoffed, crossing her arms. "Oh, please, you're overreacting. That money was mine anyway. I told you I was helping with some investment. You're just paranoid." "Paranoid," I repeated, voice rising. "You took $300, $0 without telling me. That's not investment, that's theft. And the house, for Jake. Are you kidding me? You've been lying to my face for months, while I was on our honeymoon, no less." She rolled her eyes. "You're making a huge deal out of nothing. Maybe I needed to do something for myself. You're always so controlling. I deserve to be happy too, you know." I couldn't believe her. That "I deserve to be happy" line was just a way for her to justify everything she'd done. I looked at her, feeling a mix of anger and heartbreak. How could she be so callous, so manipulative? I thought about all the times I'd trusted her, all the plans we'd made. Now I saw her for what she really was, a liar, a thief, and a cheat. I told her I had enough evidence to take her to court, that I was done playing her game. Her face twisted and she started to scream, calling me jealous, insecure, and saying I was ruining her life. She even tried to turn it around, saying I was the one cheating because I'd been suspicious. The audacity. I wanted to shake her, tell her she'd gone too far, but I kept my composure. I knew I had to stay calm if I wanted to win this. I left that day with a heavy heart, knowing I'd just begun a war I might never fully win, but I also knew I couldn't let her get away with this. She'd taken everything, my trust, my money, my marriage, and I wasn't going to let her walk out of this scot-free. I was ready to fight for what was mine, no matter how ugly it got. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious all at once. It was like waking up from a nightmare that I couldn't escape. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I let her get away with this for so long. But the truth was, I'd been naive. I'd believed in her, believed in us. And now, all I had left was the resolve to do whatever it took to reclaim my life. I knew the road ahead would be messy, filled with legal battles and emotional pain, but I was determined. Because at the end of the day, I deserved better than a lying, cheating wife who stole from me and played with my feelings like they were nothing. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I threw myself into gathering even more evidence, consulting with different lawyers and lining up the pieces for a legal battle I knew would be brutal. Of course, didn't take it lying down. She started throwing tantrums, calling me all sorts of names and threatening to ruin me in court. She claimed I was a jealous, insecure husband who was trying to control her, that she was the victim here. But I knew better. I had the proof, screenshots of her messages, bank statements, the transfer records, and I wasn't going to let her gaslight me. One night I caught her in another lie. I was going through the joint account statements again, just to double check, and I found a series of deposits she'd hidden. Small amounts, day after day, going into an account I hadn't seen before. When I traced it back, I realized she'd been funneling money out of our account for months, slowly siphoning off even more than I initially thought. She'd been planning her escape for a long time. Probably, she'd had this house for Jake in mind from the start. I felt a mix of rage and sadness. How could she have done this? How could she have lied to my face, played the innocent wife? While secretly screwing me over, I couldn't wrap my head around it. I'd trusted her with everything, my heart, my money, my future, and she'd repaid me by stabbing me in the back. The betrayal was almost physically painful. I decided I needed to confront her again, but this time I wanted to do it in a way that would shake her. I set up a meeting at her apartment. When she saw me walk in with my lawyer, her face twisted into a mixture of anger and panic. She knew she'd been caught red-handed, but she still tried to put on her victim act. She started crying, claiming I was ruining her life, that she loved me, and that everything she'd done was because she was desperate for happiness. She said she never wanted to hurt me, that she'd been trapped and confused. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her that her lies and theft had crossed a line she couldn't come back from. I handed her the evidence, screenshots of her messages, the bank transfers, the hidden deposits. I told her I was filing for divorce, and I'd be seeking full custody of any future kids, if there were any, because I didn't trust her anymore. Her face went pale and she started yelling, accusing me of trying to ruin her, of being a jealous bastard. Her voice cracked, but I stayed firm. That night I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with utter exhaustion. I had finally taken control of the situation. I'd confronted her with the truth, and I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. Still, the emotional scars ran deep. The idea that the woman I loved was capable of all this cheating, stealing, lying hit me hard. I wondered how I'd ever trust anyone again. I also realized I needed to start rebuilding myself. I'd lost a lot: money, trust, my marriage, but I still had my dignity. I decided I'd move forward no matter how painful it was. I'd seek therapy, not just to process everything, but to learn how to heal. I wasn't naive enough to think it would be easy, but I'd come out of this stronger. I had to. Because if I let her win, if I let her destroy me emotionally, then I'd be nothing. In the end, I learned that betrayal cuts deep, especially when it's from someone you trusted implicitly. But I also learned that sometimes, the only way to reclaim your life is to face the truth head-on, no matter how ugly it gets. I'll always carry the scars of this betrayal, but I refuse to let it define me. I deserve better, and I'm going to find it, one step at a time. The legal process moved quickly once I handed over all the evidence. My lawyer filed the divorce papers, and I also started the process of recovering the stolen money. Predictably, through every tantrum she could muster, she hired her own attorney, trying to spin her lies even more, claiming I was emotionally abusive, controlling, and that her affair with Jake was just a mistake she regretted. She insisted she loved me and only did all this because she was unhappy. But I knew better. It was surreal sitting across from her in court, seeing her try to paint herself as the victim. I had to stay composed, stick to the facts, and let the evidence speak for itself. lawyer tried to argue that she was entitled to half of everything, including the house she bought for Jake, but I had the receipts, the bank records, and witnesses who could testify about her theft. It was a mess, but I was confident I'd get a fair shot. Meanwhile, I worked with the bank and law enforcement to trace the stolen $300, $0. It took weeks, but eventually, we recovered most of the money. The house she bought for Jake was seized, and she faced charges for embezzlement and fraud. Seeing her face the legal consequences was oddly satisfying. After all, she had played dirty, so I believed she deserved to be held accountable. Throughout it all, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I was finally free from her lies and manipulation, but I also felt the loss deeply. I'd lost my wife, my trust, and a chunk of my savings. I'd been in the worst way possible, and it hurt more than I expected. Still, the court proceedings made me realize that justice, however imperfect, could help me move forward. The divorce was finalized a few months later. Fought hard for custody, but I had the evidence, proof of her deceit and theft, and I was awarded full custody of any future children. I knew I'd never be able to trust her again, and I didn't want that kind of person around my potential kids. I also received a significant settlement from the court, enough to start rebuilding my life financially. The aftermath was tough. I had to rebuild trust in myself, learn how to love again, and figure out how to move past the betrayal. I sought therapy, and it helped me process everything. I realized I'd spent so long trusting blindly, believing in the fairy tale of marriage, that I'd forgotten how to protect myself. Now I knew better. I knew I had to be cautious, but I also refused to shut myself off from love forever. Looking back, I learned a lot from this nightmare. Betrayal cuts deep, but it also teaches you resilience. I learned that honesty, communication, and trust are fragile, and once broken, they're hard to repair. But I also learned that I'm stronger than I thought. I can survive betrayal, come out the other side, and rebuild my life from the ashes. If I could give anyone advice, it's this: never ignore the signs, trust your instincts, and don't be afraid to fight for what's right. If someone shows you they're not worth your trust, cut them loose. Because in the end, you're the only one responsible for your happiness, and no one should steal that from you. I may have lost a lot, but I gained clarity and strength I never knew I had. And that's worth more than any house or savings. Now, sitting here reflecting on everything that happened, I realize just how much I've been through. It's been a brutal, soul-crushing experience, but somehow, I've come out the other side with a clearer sense of who I am and what I deserve. The betrayal from was a blow I never saw coming. She lied, cheated, stole, and tried to destroy everything we had. But I also learned that even in the darkest moments, there's a flicker of hope, a chance to rebuild. I've come to understand that trust is fragile, and when it's broken, it's almost impossible to fix. But that doesn't mean you have to stay broken forever. I've learned to rebuild my trust in myself first, trust that I can survive, trust that I can be strong enough to move on. I've learned that revenge isn't about hurting her back. It's about standing tall, reclaiming what's mine, and making sure she can't do this to anyone else. Looking back, I regret trusting her blindly. I wish I'd seen the signs sooner, but I also forgive myself for being naive. Sometimes, love blinds us and we ignore the red flags because we want to believe in the best. But now I see clearly. I see that I deserve honesty, loyalty, and respect. And if someone can't give me that, I'm better off without them. This whole ordeal has taught me the importance of protecting myself, emotionally, financially, and physically. I've become more cautious, more aware, and more determined to never let myself be vulnerable in the same way again. I've also learned that sometimes you have to take the hard road, confronting lies, fighting legal battles, facing heartbreak, to finally find peace. To anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, I want you to know you're not alone. Betrayal cuts deep, but it's not the end of your story. You can come out stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Trust your instincts, stay true to yourself, and never let anyone steal your happiness. Because at the end of the day, the only person who truly matters in your life is you, and you owe it to yourself to fight for a better, honest future. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this: I'll keep moving forward. I'll rebuild what was lost, learn from my pain, and cherish the lessons that betrayal has taught me. Because if there's one thing I've realized, it's that even in the worst moments, there is always a chance for renewal. And I'm determined to find mine.